A violent serial rapist with an alleged 43 victims has been released just this year in Washington state. The South Hill rapist has been convicted, given life sentences, but has been through several different convictions, and it has dwindled down to this point where they can no longer keep him in prison, and we'll get into why. While many state that he has victimized over 40 women, he continues to maintain his innocence. Now, a book was written about this case due to the fact that this man's mother was just as insane, some put it, as her son, and she would end up going to jail just after he was convicted. But we will dive into why exactly that was, how insane it was, and the behavior between this mother and son relationship, and this book that dives further into that. I will have it linked down below. It's called Son, the Psychopath and His Victims. While this is a terrifying development in the criminal justice world and for Washington state, many survivors are still around and have spoken out in order to try to keep him behind bars or in a secured location. And they were all but dismissed as this man has been released. It's infuriating, it's important, and I hope to spread the news and talk about rehabilitation in and of itself and our beliefs on that, and why I don't necessarily believe that it can be done for all individuals. You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I am Brooke Makenna. I'm so grateful that you are here, a part of this genuine gem community. A quick thank you to our sponsor, Misplay, who allows me to continue making these videos. Now, Misplay is actually a rewards app where you can play mobile games in order to earn gift cards for real stores. They know that their users are extremely hardworking people, and so I'm so excited to announce that they are doing a giveaway, the Season of Giving $20,000 giveaway, ending on October 30th, 2025, and happening right now. Misplay is perfect for your wants in your life, like I'm doing with my Amazon gift card. I'm getting a few fall pieces. But whether you use your gift card on wants or needs, this is something that you can do on your phone. And to enter the Season of Giving giveaway, all you have to do is download the free Misplay app on Android or iOS down in my description, play the games in order to earn points, and then redeem those points in the shop for a gift card, and then that is when you will enter to win the sweepstakes. Just download Misplay with my link, and if you're a new user, that will actually provide a 1 free entry into the sweepstakes. Now let's get back to the story. But it was back from around 1978 to 1981 in Spokane, Washington. There was a wave of essays occurring. Many young women were going to the police with their survival stories about a man who had violently assaulted them. These stories had quite a few things in common. This man smelled like a very pungent soap, sometimes like peppermint. He would always ask them vulgar questions about themselves or their family, and he would also shove his gloved fist into their throat as he essayed them. He would threaten to kill them if they went to the police, and he would often beat them to the point that they believed they were going to die. Investigators were quickly forced to confront this truth that this was likely a single offender in the area. And as investigations began, they noticed a pattern that not only led to a timeline, but also that it was occurring on local bus routes. There is believed to be around 49 essays in Spokane in 1978, and then in 1981 there was believed to be 127. Quite a lot of those had commonalities, leading investigators to believe that this offender was not only going after many women, but he wasn't slowing down. On April 26th of 1978, when a 19-year-old married mother of an almost 1-year-old was walking alone in Spokane from a restaurant. She had gotten into a fight with her husband. They were at this biker bar. Her husband was friends with a lot of them, and they were all kind of arguing and getting loud, so she decided to go home by herself. And she took this shortcut so her husband wouldn't follow her. But while walking on the 1200 block of Indiana Avenue, this woman would be essayed shortly after midnight. She claimed that a man had popped out from behind a car, grabbed her by the shoulders, and placed her hand over her face, telling her not to scream, and if she didn't, he would take it away. She nodded, but as soon as he released his hand, she was screaming for help. He then rammed his hand down her throat and dragged her to the nearby bushes where she was essayed while he repeatedly jammed his fist into her mouth so she wouldn't scream. She felt his nails scratching the back of her throat. She remembered that this man had longish blonde hair with sideburns and a mustache. He was neatly dressed in a blue jean outfit and a heavy jacket. He had broad shoulders and was much taller than her. She stood at 5'5". And when a car drove by, she was actually able to see, because it was already dark, she was able to see a glimpse of the coloring. And she said his eyes were about blue or green. And they didn't blink. They were full of hatred. She didn't know if she was going to live in those moments. And once he was done, he got up and told her not to go to the police or he would kill her. She got up and immediately ran for help, asking an officer to hold her as soon as he arrived. No suspects or witnesses were found. 2 years later, in 1980, a 15-year-old girl was headed home from a Fog Hat concert on August 29th in Spokane. She had decided to take the bus home, and she got off a few blocks before her South Hill home, and she was at 16th and Cedar when she was essayed around midnight. This was only 10 minutes away from the location of the first victim we spoke about. Around this time, a columnist for the Spokesman Review named Chris Peck wrote, "A horrible specter is back on the South Hill. In jogging clothes, threatening with a knife, it has begun again to strike at women in one of Spokane's classiest neighborhoods. Women on the South Hill, be furious together. Look for clues. Find the courage to open your eyes. Press charges if you can. Otherwise, creeps will prevail." Now, what I want to point out right off the bat is that these victims that I'm talking about here have been ones that are connected, not officially, to this man. We're talking about the South Hill rapist. There were many assaults that were happening throughout these years that often were not posted in the media. A lot of these women were not named. Some, of course, probably did not come forward. And so these here are just the ones that we know about that could possibly be linked to this man. So 2 months after that, on October 23rd, a 27-year-old woman was returning home from work. She had just moved to this neighborhood. She arrived home around 6:30, and she was essayed at the 3600 block of 22nd. Her name would actually be revealed, one of the only survivors named, Julie Harmia. She and her husband had just moved to Spokane, and she had just finished her first day of work as an assistant manager at the Zales jewelry store. She was walking home and she noticed a man jogging past her. He looked like a college student, but then he crouched behind an RV, which she thought was weird, but she thought he was playing with somebody trying to surprise them until he attacked her and he had a knife. He was covering her mouth with his gloved hand. He dragged her to a vacant lot where he stuck his hand deeper down her throat. He essayed her as he asked her questions about her sex life, and he swept her hair over her face so she couldn't look at him. When headlights shone on them as a car passed, she was able to look right at him, and he had a very pronounced jaw. He had almond-shaped eyes, and he had loosely curly hair. He got upset. He said that police could not protect her 24 hours a day. She would survive this, and she would go to the doctor, who would notice that she had injuries that noted a distinct escalation from the previous victims. She had a battered face, her lip was cut, she had scratches all over her face, and her throat appeared as though someone had taken sandpaper to it on the inside. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about Julie and how she dealt with all of this and her feelings about all of this in a little bit. But 2 months after that, on December 17th, a 14-year-old girl was walking to meet a friend out Ralph and 18th, and she was essayed about 6:30 p.m. That was all that was really known about this victim. But a month after that, a pattern was definitely emerging. It was now 1981, and the Spokesman Review newspaper published a map of the crime locations and their correlations to the bus routes. Other media outlets, though, seemed less concerned, such as the Spokane Daily Chronicle, whose managing editor was Gordon Coe, who wrote, "It is hoped that every man out jogging is not hounded off the streets because some rape reports have said the attacker wore jogging clothes." That seems like a very victim-blaming statement and not at all helpful to find this man, but that is what was reported. On February 5th, a 51-year-old woman was jogging at Hart Field, which was a school track in Spokane, when she was essayed around 7 a.m. She said her attacker wore gloves and pinned her to the ground with his knees on her shoulders. She stated that she believed he needed that very badly. The next day, a witness would come forward saying that he worked at the Sacagawea Junior High School, which was right by that school track. And he was there that morning, and he had seen a silver Chevrolet Citation in the area. These license plates were yellow, which was the state's personalized plates, but without personalized numbers or letters. So this was the first clue as to who a perpetrator could be. Only 4 days later, on February 9th, a 20-year-old woman walked to drop her son off at her mother's home and was essayed 3 houses away in the West 400 block of 24th Ave. This was around 6:30 in the morning. 6 victims, all within the Spokane area. This appeared to be happening in the evening hours or in the very early morning hours. But this was specifically in the upper middle class neighborhood of Spokane, South Hill. There was also a strange report made on February 28th of 1981 on 33rd Ave and High Drive, where a man named Dr. John Little was out on his morning run when he saw a man naked from the waist down about 300 feet away from him. John pursued this man, believing that this could be that man that everyone was looking for. The man would end up jumping over the edge of a bluff, and then he emerged with red shorts on, so he just kind of let him go. But on March 4th of 1981, the Spokane Police Chief Robert Panther called a press conference due to the public pressure for answers. He announced that they had spent 8,600 hours on this man trying to find him, and the Spokane media had dubbed him as the South Hill Rapist. Little did anyone know that the police at this time were surveilling a potential suspect. You see, they had started looking at a man on February 25th of 1981. However, they didn't feel as though they had enough evidence to arrest him just yet. 4 days after the press conference, an 18-year-old, she was confronted by a man who was waving a plastic private part while she was jogging near East Upriver Drive near the Spokane River. This was Marriott Gullickson, who was a college freshman and a track athlete who lived near the Spokane River. She was doing her usual 10-mile run when she saw a man in jeans running toward her. He had something at his crotch and he was kind of moving his hand, and she saw a large fake private area. She said that he was yelling vulgarities at her, and Mary had recently had a theft at her apartment, and she was saying that she was basically just had it with bad people, and so she turned around and started chasing this man. She said that he looked at her shocked, and she was gaining on him, and she was screaming for help, and a couple passed by in a car and offered to help, so they were also chasing him down. He went to a nearby nursing home and got into a car and sped off. They wrote down his license plate, and witnesses once again stated they saw a Chevy Citation in the area. So they gave this information to the police. However, this was a bit further out than the other victims of the South Hill Rapist, and unknown if this one could have been connected. But while watching their prime suspect, Spokane police also began to stake out the local bus stations and routes in case they were able to catch this man in the act. They had trackers on his vehicle, and they found that this man often cruised High Drive in South Hill, where several of the crime scenes were, and that he followed the bus routes. Now, under surveillance, the suspect was actually able to elude police, and it was believed that he had exposed himself to the victim back on March 8th, so the police decided that it was no longer safe just to let him walk as a free man. So even though they didn't have all of the evidence that they had hoped for, on March 10th of 1981, police arrived at a Spokane real estate office and arrested 34-year-old Frederick Kevin Coe. he was officially arrested for the heart-filled essay of the 51-year-old woman. Now, the name Coe might ring a bell, and that's because you've heard it here before. The Spokane Daily Chronicle managing editor was Gordon Coe. He turned out to be Frederick Coe's father. He was also in charge of a program that was receiving tips to identify the South Hill rapist for the paper. His son Frederick called himself Kevin instead. So Kevin Coe is now at the police department, and police had linked the license plate seen at Hartfield to Gordon Coe, his father, and they quickly realized that it was his son who was driving. They had shown Kevin Coe's photo to the Hartfield survivor, and she identified him as her attacker. Now, Kevin Coe was found to be a real estate agent and a former radio announcer. He also called himself a radio DJ, a news editor, a media man, a champion boxer, and he was the author of a self-published Sex in the White House book, which was pretty vulgar in itself. This was self-published, and he was doing nothing at the time to make money. He was living entirely off of his parents, Gordon and Ruth, and that will not be the last time that you will hear about them. The same evening of his arrest, all of these survivors were brought down to police headquarters for a lineup. 6 women, the women that I spoke about to you, ended up identifying Kevin Coe as their attacker, one of which was Julie Harmian, one of the only survivors identified due to the others' fear of this man and his retribution. As Kevin Coe was arrested for 6 essays, his father, Gordon Coe, was forced to take a leave of absence from the paper. Kevin Coe pleaded innocent to all counts and was released on a $35,000 bond. Police and prosecutors believed that he was responsible for dozens of other rapes, about 43. Kevin continued to state that it was all a case of mistaken identity, and when the defense tried to offer him a plea deal for hospitalization instead of prison, he said, "I'm not a sexual psychopath and I'm not guilty." But the trial began on July 20th of 1981, and they had to find jurors from all the way in Seattle for anyone to be impartial because everybody knew about this man and the horror that he was causing in Spokane. Both of Kevin's parents took the stand, and Ruth, she told the jury that she had an alibi for every assault for Kevin because he was often home at that time, that he would eat dinner and breakfast with them. She called him son, not by his name, and said that they had gone out several times during the time that this man was attacking, trying to actually find this perpetrator that was all over the news. There was a secret witness, $1,000 reward from the Chronicle. So Ruth said that she and her son would go out trying to look for him. Her son would jog while she would follow behind in his car at a very slow pace. She said they were unsuccessful, so they gave up, but she said that explained why his car was seen so often near the bus routes and the crimes. So Kevin's ex-wife, Jenny Coe, who was not well liked by Kevin's parents, stated that she had been with him since about 1972. So in 1978, when these crimes were believed to have begun, he actually helped her find an apartment, and yet he didn't move in with her. He continued to live with his parents a block away. She said he hadn't made his own money in years, and even after years of being together on and off, he hadn't told his parents about their relationship. She stated that his mother, Ruth, tyrannized her son and her husband and tried to do the same thing to her. That she would meddle in their marriage, and she once even scratched her face with her fingernails and it scarred her. She said Ruth never apologized, and all Kevin said was Mother Bear forgot to take her thyroid pills. Jenny said that Ruth dressed like a young woman and that her and her son acted more like boyfriend and girlfriend. Ruth was ruthless with her husband, Gordon, often yelling and threatening divorce. And Jenny said that Kevin would come over occasionally, but would lie about it to his parents, that he was often lying even to her, and that he would always be changing his appearance, sometimes even wearing wigs. She said the whole family was obsessed with their looks. She said that he actually did finally begin to stay at her apartment for the first time, and all he would talk about was the fact that his mother was going to be mad and that he didn't want to break his mother's heart like this. Now, he was sneaking away from home as a 31-year-old man at that point. Jenny believed that Ruth Coe was mentally ill and her relationship with her son was essentially sick. The next day, after staying the night at the apartment, he called his mother and confessed. Jenny then began to receive threatening phone calls from Ruth when Kevin wouldn't return home. Kevin's car was then vandalized while at this apartment. Gordon ended up telling them that Ruth was back with her shrink after she flipped out. She would also take the stand and say that Kevin had been acting very suspicious and had mysterious cuts all over him. She said he often wore gloves, and she once found him washing an oven mitt at 7 a.m. Ultimately, she believed he was, in fact, the South Hill rapist. Now, Dr. Robert Wexler testified as a psychologist hired by the Coe family. This alleged a documented confession of the 6th rape. Kevin would say that he admitted to one of the rapes so that he could be treated at a hospital and not go to prison, but then he denied the statement altogether. Kevin would take the stand himself, denying ever owning gloves, oven mitts, a stocking cap, or ever raping anyone. 6 victims gave positive identification of this man. It was also revealed by the prosecution that Kevin had received speeding tickets in the same areas right around the rapes when they occurred, as well as his blood type matching the scenes where the blood type was showing up in bodily fluids. The prosecution claimed that his only alibi was that he was either eating breakfast or dinner with his parents. So 8 days later, Kevin Coe was convicted on 4 of the 6 charges. His mother, Ruth, was infuriated. She actually spoke to the Spokesman Review that she believed that Judge Shields had not played fair and that she would never in turn try to play fair again. Now, during the sentencing phase, the prosecution pointed out that the state law still allowed convicted rapists to be castrated. Kevin Coe began to claim that he was a sexual psychopath, something he had previously denied, and that he needed help. The judge stated that his earlier denials of this meant that he was unable to receive the treatment. A psychiatrist actually testified that he had told them he was jealous of the South Hill rapist and committed a copycat. However, this did not work, his elaborate lie, and he was sentenced to 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, and life for all 4 victims, all to be served consecutively. So ultimately, he really was not supposed to be getting out ever. He was sent to Walla Walla, and while in prison, Kevin Coe, or Fred Coe, stated, "To use the very colorful prison language, I assure you that taking pussy is not my game. I have never had to do so, and I would not do so. I adore women, have no animosity whatsoever toward them, and have no weird hang-ups about my mother, and am totally normal sexually." This isn't going to be the end of Kevin Coe's sentencing and him being in a courtroom. But before we dive into that, 3 months after this, on November 20th, his mother, Ruth, was arrested for soliciting first-degree murder. That's right, the convicted South Hill's mother had come face to face with an undercover cop who she was trying to hire to be a hitman for the judge and prosecutor on her son's case. She had given a $500 down payment and agreed to pay $4,000 in total to kill prosecutor Donald C. Brockett and Judge George T. Shields. The undercover officer was wired and caught 60-year-old Ruth confessing to this. He said, "We are talking about the same thing. You want those people," Ruth says, "gone." Officer says, "Dead?" Ruth, "Dead, right. If I had my druthers, I'd have that prosecutor just made a complete vegetable so he could never ever be anything but a vegetable, so that they had to care for him forever, and he lived on and on that way." And the judge, the officer says, "Just tell me what you want." Ruth says, "Well, and that judge, I'd like him gone, dead, and I'd like both of them dead, really, except that with Brockett, I feel that he's a man about 46 or 47, and he's been so filthy, and my feeling for him is that I would love to see him just an addle-padded vegetable that had to be cared for, and his family had to take care of him for the rest of his life. I mean, diapers and all the rest of it. He wanted 42 years of my son's life gone. I'd like to see him sit 24 years in, as a baby. To have him gone would be great too. I mean, you can never be sure, I suppose, how you clobber them. That could be the way it'd come out. So dead is great, but I do think he should suffer. While she was arrested, she was released on $30,000 bond, and the defense would claim that if the police officer did not come to her posing as a hitman, that she would not have sought one, that she was insane at the time of the crime. But a psychiatrist testified that Ruth told them she saw horns growing out of the judge's head when he pronounced her son's sentence. Gordon Coe then testified that she had been abusing prescription drugs for years. Ruth was on suicide watch at one point during the trial, and in the end, she was found guilty. But she was only sentenced to 20 years suspended, 1 year in jail, and 10 years of probation. So she would only be serving 1 year. And Gordon Coe said that this was a clear case of entrapment. But this saga was not over, because by 1984, 3 years after Kevin was sentenced, the Washington Supreme Court tossed out his convictions due to the victims being hypnotized before identifying him. He was released on bail for a year before being convicted of 3 rapes and sentenced to life plus 55 years. His appeal then made it to the Washington Supreme Court, and in 1985, they overturned 2 more of the convictions and only upheld 1. The woman who saw his face, Julie Harmia, who did not need to be hypnotized. He was given a 25-year sentence. Kevin refused to go to any parole hearings or undergo any prison counseling. In 2006, he fully served that sentence. The sentence that he had after many overturned convictions and appeals. He stated he spent the whole time researching the case to find the real rapist. Thankfully, in 1990, Washington passed the Community Protection Act to allow the state to indefinitely retain dangerous, sexually violent predators even after their criminal sentences if they were found to be guilty by a jury of a mental defect that makes them likely to reoffend if they are sent out into the public. So they are ultimately sent to a special commitment center on McNeil Island where they are held and receiving treatment. So the investigation into this to try to get Kevin Coe into this program revealed that DNA evidence actually linked Kevin to the one rape that he had been charged with in the end, Julie Harmia, but not to any others. So in 2008, the civil trial began to see if he could be admitted to McNeil Island. Once again, these victims were forced to testify for their safety. Julie Harmia took the stand recounting that her rape was so difficult to talk about, but she felt obliged to support the dozens of victims of SA in which Kevin is the alleged perpetrator. She said, "In all good conscience, we know if he gets out, he'll reoffend again. I have to speak for these women, and we have to keep this in the public eye." She wanted him committed to this mental facility. Another survivor who wants to remain anonymous stated, "You gave me a life sentence. The fear will never go away. I was just a young adult, and you destroyed over 40 years of my life." Kevin testified that the risk of him committing another rape was 0, but he also still denied ever doing that to anyone. He said he did not believe that he needed sexual deviancy treatment.
Could you please state your full name and spell both your first and last name?
Legal name, Kevin Coe, no middle name, no middle initial, Kevincoe.
You formerly went by the name Frederick Coe?
Yes.
I want to ask you first about an incident that occurred on March 18th, 1977. On that day, did you enter the women's bathroom at the Vips restaurant on approximately 3rd and Division?
No.
You were in Spokane on that date, weren't you?
My recollection would be no.
Where were you on that date?
Yeah, either in Santa Monica or Las Vegas. It's where I was residing.
Mr. Coe, isn't it true that on that day you were contacted by 2 Spokane police officers at your parents' address?
I have no recollection of that.
Where were you living at that time, March 1977?
Well, as I say, it would have either been Santa Monica or Las Vegas. I'm not sure which.
When did you move to Santa Monica or Las Vegas?
I moved back and forth between both those places between 76 and 78. So at any given time, I wouldn't be able to reconstruct that. 78 is when I came back.
When did you come back?
My best recollection is it might have been right around April. I don't remember the exact date. It was like spring.
But a jury declared Kevin to be sexually violent, and they were able to admit him to McNeil Island indefinitely. He had been diagnosed with mixed personality disorder, narcissistic, histrionic, and antisocial features. He also had nearly all of the core personality traits of a psychopath. But he spent the last 17 years petitioning the court to be released into a less restrictive alternative. He specifically asked to be released to an adult home in Spokane, Washington. He was now 78 in 2025, and a state expert as well as a forensic investigator have both determined that they cannot say he currently meets the definition of a sexually violent predator. Doctors stated he is feeble, he's emaciated, he has frequent episodes of incontinence and risk of falls. The psychiatrist stated that he is exhibiting cognitive decline. And in 2021, he suffered a stroke and congestive heart failure. They have said they do not believe that Mr. Coe is at risk for reoffending because of his advancing age, his declining mental and physical health, but they have also stated that they cannot state to a reasonable degree of psychological certainty that his personality disorders seriously impair his ability to control his behavior or render him likely to engage in these predatory acts if unconditionally released to the community. Kevin was said to keep to himself for all this time in prison on McNeil Island and had a long-standing history of treatment refusal. He did not have a job, he did not participate in programs, and he rarely left his cell. He did not believe he needed any sort of help. But just this month, in October of 2025, survivors tried to stop his release. The woman, who was 15 years old on August 29th of 1980, when she was essayed, said that every day she tries to lessen the amount of triggers she has. She stated, 45 years of your life, you go through everything again. It's a re-rape. Because when you are raped, the minute you get up and you walk home, your survival days begin. Another survivor said, I have trouble talking to men in particular. I have very little trust in humanity or human beings. You have made me a shell with nothing inside me but darkness. You beat me up. You made me answer questions about my family, my child, and then you threatened to kill me and my family if I turned you in. She said that after the attack, she could not sleep and could only go outside with her dog. Her marriage fell apart. And she spoke about that during the trials, she would hear women talking about that Kevin was a good-looking man. And she said that it was a slap in the face to hear that. She said to Kevin, how dare you breathe the air we breathe? It's not fair. This is not fair to me. You take up space that you don't need, space that you are not supposed to have. She acknowledged that she still felt like a victim, and she will continue to close her curtains and look over her shoulder in fear that Coe might come back for her. She said if he ever does, she will have to become a survivor. Another survivor stated, I wish I could have done this years ago, but it has been many years. I have seen more and know more, and I can sure as hell say more, and I wish you were dead. Spokane County Deputy Prosecutor Preston McCollum created a team, and they were really trying to look for any loophole to keep Kevin at McNeil Island. But there was nothing to keep them there, as the state said that they had to show burden of proof to show that he was likely to reoffend if he was released, and they said they couldn't. He personally apologized to the survivors, saying in this situation he is released without ever acknowledging guilt or even completing treatment. I personally believe unless he changes his ways, he will spend an eternity surrounded by flames. Kevin Coe was released in October of 2025, and he was placed in an adult home to receive 24-hour care in Federal Way, Washington. The Federal Way mayor stated, we want to acknowledge community concerns regarding the placement of Kevin Coe. While we do not have a say in this matter, we understand the sensitivity surrounding it. Mr. Coe is a man in his mid-70s who is largely confined to a wheelchair. While this does not eliminate the possibility of reoffense, we are confident that his presence in Federal Way does not pose a significant public safety risk to our residents.
There's no knowledge of anybody coming into our neighborhood that has a record like this, and so we're concerned, very concerned, because we have a lot of kids in the neighborhood, and we want them to be as safe, as much as possible.
Anyone you ask about this case will tell you that the original 6 victims were not all the victims of Kevin Coe. They truly believe that he could have as many as 43. In fact, in the midst of this wave of SA, on September 9th of 1979, a woman named Shelley Monahan was working as a broadcaster known as Sunshine Shelley. She was on stage for a disco dance that she was putting on for young kids when she was essayed outside of KGRB radio studios. She was walking home and he started beating her before leaving her for dead. Now, Shelley could not identify her attacker and her case was never tried. However, a witness named Cheryl Ferguson said that she could connect Shelley and Kevin Coe. Cheryl stated that she had seen Kevin and knew him because they had worked at the James S. Black real estate office together. Cheryl said she was a secretary at the office where Kevin was hired at after her, and she would state that Kevin treated her oddly, like a mother figure, and would call her at home and ask why other agents in the office didn't like him. He started going to work in 3-piece suits and then soon began to show up in sweatsuits and was unkempt. Cheryl stated that she had seen him occasionally with scratches on his face, and he would say that it was from dog attacks while jogging. Cheryl said that Kevin had been escorted out of the building about a year into him being there because he was being fired. But she said that she had seen Kevin hiding behind a tree at Hamlin Park where the disco was held, watching Shelley. Shelley later said that she believed Kevin was her attacker due to a letter she received before the rape and a threatening call from prison after Kevin's conviction. She remembered lying in the dirt, being essayed, beaten so badly that bones were broken in her face. She is worried about if his condition is as bad as they have said because of the fact that she knows Kevin is a con artist. He is good at being Coe, as she says. And her testimony was actually recorded. I'll place it here.
September 9th, 1979, I had just gotten off work at KJRB radio station. For those of you that still come up and say Sunshine Shelley, same person, older version. That night, after Coe beat me almost to death, especially my face, and raped me and left me for dead in that field, there was a star in the sky, and he had told me during that night that he was going to kill me before he let me go. I had a tendency to believe him based on how badly he beat me. I looked up at that star and I started praying to God and asked him to please, the worst that he could do was kill me, just let me live. And I promised God that night that I would spend the rest of my life making sure that other victims, survivors as I like to call them, are able to get the help that they need to overcome that one horrible incident that happened. I too believe that we are survivors. If we were able to talk to Fred Coe in person, I would beg him to get help. I would beg for him to admit what he did, to ask forgiveness. I don't think that's going to happen. I too believe that the only way until he takes his last breath is that he asks God, Jesus Christ, for forgiveness. I too have forgiven him. I too feel free. It has allowed me to live a very good life. I use that word free because there's a lot to that. Many of us have lives where we have children and grandchildren. We're able to plant a garden. We're able to see the sunrise and see the sunset. None of us should ever consider, even after today, that Fred Coe is ever going to be free, because he will never be free. Satan has been a part of his life from the time he was a young adult and started doing these crimes. I would ask those that are still hurting, that still suffer from the incidents that happened to them, to remember that you are a survivor. Jesus is with you. And with that in your life, Satan will never win. And the same thing is with Fred Coe. You will never win. He is referred to me as what he calls his bad penny. When Dateline interviewed him, when he was still in Walla Walla, he wanted to know if they were going to interview me as well, and they did. And the producer said, she's a bad penny. And they asked him why he called me that. And he said, because she just won't go away. She won't shut up. And it's not me speaking right now. It's the Holy Spirit. and it fills you in a way that freedom is wonderful. And we all know that even when he walks out of McNeil Island, he will never be free unless his last breath is what he does by asking God forgiveness. Thank you, Your Honor.
Other victims from that time period have since come forward. A nurse was headed to work on December 11th, 1979 at around 6:45 in the morning when a man shoved his gloved hand down her throat and told her he had a knife and would cut her if she moved. A full-time law student was essayed on March 11th, 1980, and she was 95% certain that it was Kevin Coe. But when she went and did the lineup, she could not be 100%, and she worked at a public defender's office, and she believed she needed to be 100% certain. Another woman was 19 years old on April 4th of 1980 when she was essayed jogging in her neighborhood. She said he put her in a chokehold and she couldn't breathe. The wave of essay in Spokane was said to end the moment that Kevin Coe was arrested. Yet because he hasn't shown any sexually violent behavior while in a place that has a strict schedule, a constant security, and likely little to no females, is he ready to be in the real world among those who fit his MO and place him back into a situation that provides little to no surveillance on what he is doing every day? Is he really this very weak man, or is that just a ploy to be released? Do you believe that rapists and murderers can be rehabilitated? What if they've never done any work in prison? What if there's no way to know if they have changed when in environments dedicated to keeping them confined and disciplined? If the law states that it must be proven that he still has this behavior, that essentially requires more victims to be made in order to keep this man, with a possibility of 40 victims who has shown his behavior previously, away from the public. Does that seem fair to you? Because it doesn't make sense to me. There are so many ways that the criminal justice system forces victims to be created because they can't do anything without them committing again or them doing something worse. You know, we talk about a lot in stalking cases. They can't do anything. They say, well, you know, he hasn't actually hurt you. Okay, so the alternative is we wait until he hurts me? It has never made sense, and I think that that is something that needs to change in order to protect the public. But do you believe that Kevin Coe was even the South Hill rapist? DNA confirms that he at least raped Julie, and many identified him in the lineup. Do you think that they have the wrong man? What an absolutely terrifying case. After all that we know and all of the convictions that this man has been given, to just have him walking the streets seems awfully crazy. But it's reality. Figured that this was something that needed to be told. So thank you so much for listening. I post every single Sunday and occasionally midweek videos as well. I also post my videos on Spotify if you'd like to listen through there. It's called Motives and Malice. And don't forget to enter the Misplay giveaway. You can download through my QR code right here. If you are a new user, that is an automatic entry into the $20,000 giveaway. But don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces.